everyone. Thanks for joining us today at Publicis Commerce on the I Could Buy That podcast. We want to keep this concise, so let me remind you about the rules of the game before we get into it. First, we invite a credible guest to share a thought that will expand how we all look at the world of commerce. This month's guest is Molly Hopp, SVP Commerce Media at Publicis Commerce. Second, we ask them to open with their thesis in one short sentence to set the stage. Chances are this is something that will be fresh, that requires a bit of explaining to better understand. And finally, we dive in deeper, looking at 3 key data points to back the thesis with some great stories to tie it all up and leave you with enough to think about and hopefully change the way you look at our industry. So, Molly, thanks for joining us today. If you could tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'm Molly Hopp. I'm part of the practice, and I have become obsessed with the commerce and the marketplace, I guess, category for quite some time in terms of really what we can do in the space, and what impact I think it has, not only in terms of what we do within our industry right now, but I really think that it's with consumers changing shopping behavior for so many reasons. I also think that the shift from brick and mortar to online to marketplaces to potentially opportunities coming to bear for small and medium-sized businesses is really interesting. And so it's just an area that I've loved being in. And I come from a performance background, so it's no surprise that commerce is something that I'm drawn to.
Yes. So you mentioned this performance background, right? I was actually going to ask you, what's your experience with commerce measurement? That's our theme of the month. Performance is measurement, has measurement. Like, what's the deal there?
Yeah, I mean, the gripe that you guys have constantly heard from, or I guess you guys being the general people of anybody who's ever talked to me, is really the challenge of shifting away from traditional marketing measures. So ROAS is really my personal enemy in terms of it being the key KPI often applied to commerce and marketplaces, but it's essentially used to guess or assume sales, but it doesn't actually offer a one-to-one, which is something that we can get to within the market places and within retailers. So, again, ROAS is really something I'm passionate in terms of shifting the industry from where they are and where I think that they need to be.
Okay. So you think we should switch away from ROAS. What's the idea that you want our listeners to buy into?
Yeah, and I've thought about this a ton of why it is so challenging across the board to really get ourselves to think about measurement in a different way and think about success in a different way. And it's really no knock on anyone in terms of, whether it's from our analytics team to us to our clients in terms of why we're so hung up on this. It's because it was the right measure for so long, and it was the right way to say, okay, here is our overall branding and marketing, and here is the best way that we can really equate it and attribute it back to actual performance and sales. But the fundamental issue of why I think so many of us can't shift away from it is because we function as marketers and we think as marketers. But when we're thinking about commerce and we're thinking about marketplaces, you have to fundamentally think of yourself as a seller and how you're actually winning and getting your product in the hand of the shopper versus another seller and versus another product. And when you're doing that, I think that that's when it's the aha, where it's like, oh, well, ROAS doesn't solve that problem for me as a seller. And that's where you can really start to have productive conversations of, okay, well, then what should I be measuring my media to? What should I be measuring my content to? And essentially, how can I win in each given marketplace?
Got it. Okay, so shifting to this seller mentality, is your argument. What do you see as the reasons as to why seller mentality is superior to marketer mentality?
I mean, at the most basic level, it's because a seller is trying to sell something and they're trying to sell it at the best margin, the highest margin that they can achieve. And they're trying to do that in a way that they get a repeat purchaser. So if that's fundamentally what you're thinking about, how you're going to measure success is very different than again, even me as someone who comes from a performance background and is a marketer and a media person at heart, we're trying to figure out, okay, how do I drive efficiencies across my total exposures and eyeballs to tell more people about it? And although that's still part of the overall experience, as a seller, you're less focused on how cheap was an eyeball, and you're more focused on, did I sell my product and at what margin and at what frequency did I do it?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, what 3 bullet points or 3 data points would you put in front of our audience to get them to start thinking like a seller?
Yeah. So this is where I really get obsessed, and it has to do with category and sales rank. But bear with me for a second. If you think about Amazon, which is number one out there in terms of being first and building a first and a third party marketplace, but so many more are coming to be. Walmart probably the second that's often mentioned, but many more are building out marketplaces and are building out this retailer experience. Across every category and subcategory, you as the seller can understand every ASIN or SKU and where it is lining up in terms of its overall rank in every category and subcategory. And essentially, there is an associated value to having that category rank, where you land on a page, and essentially how likely you are to win the buy box and essentially be the seller selling the product to a person. And so if you think about it in that way, and you're actually always trying to understand the right levers to pull for organic opportunities for building up your PDP, your product display page, and your brand stores, coupled with really pushing the right paid media message forward, as well as targeting the right sponsored ads and keywords, then and associating how that's impacting your overall category rank, that's where you can really understand across your entire catalog how well you're performing and how far you can push each given ASIN in a long tail approach to be more successful among its category and its subcategory. So that's number one. Number two is really thinking about the value of keywords and how they function on different marketplaces. And so this is, I think there's two kind of you can come at it in two different ways, which is really thinking about behavior and qualitative, and then the overall quantitative and how you action on it. And what I mean by that is that typically people, for one, don't lie in a search, because you're not going to find what you want if you actually don't tell the truth for what you're looking for. And that applies to search across the board, right? If you're talking Google, Bing, as well as when you're talking in the retail space. And so we can really start to understand what are the key triggers and how people are searching, both for solutions and products, and apply that in the right way, both organic and paid. On the flip side, when we're thinking about a Amazon versus a Walmart, how people shop and what keywords they use are very different. So for example, on Amazon, people do use Amazon more in terms of a traditional search behavior. So they are doing, longer queries. They're saying, what snacks are good for a keto diet? And they're really looking for Amazon to be an expert and propose the solution. And then they start to go down to what product they're going to purchase. Whereas on a Walmart is still approached is, okay, I have built my grocery list, and now I'm going to go to Walmart and I'm going to type in the specific brand and product that I'm searching for. And so in that way, how we think about targeting paid keyword and understanding the behavior is going to be different based on which environment you are in. I feel like, did I cover it? I feel like, did I give you two and you need three?
Yeah.
I think that's right. Tied to the keywords and how people behave within Walmart and Amazon. Just in general, marketplaces function very differently, and they don't function to the benefit of you, the marketer. They function to the benefit of them, the retailer. They structure so that they feel like the right seller should win within their marketplace. And then they also want to make sure that they're staying true to their overall customer and shopper experience. So for example, a Walmart, who and how they've positioned themselves to their shopper for years and years and years as a brick and mortar, that experience they still want to translate and be the experience that they have on Walmart.com. And so how they're going to prioritize sellers in terms of the content and how they're communicating, how they're pricing themselves, how they're promoting themselves, those triggers, those indicators of what seller they think should win is going to be different than who Amazon prioritizes. On Amazon, a good example for that is the continued debate of who they give preferential treatment to in terms of a first or a third party seller and what impact that has in terms of that seller winning, as well as then all of the other elements that are really feeding that flywheel. And as we continue to see the evolution of more marketplaces coming to bear, they're going to make solutions, in the light of what's, again, best for them as a retailer and best for their sellers, where I think we're going to see a huge impact in terms of especially these grocers moving to marketplaces and online experience where they have loyalty cards that are so important to the shopping experience for years and years. So what impact is that going to have in terms of the performance of a product and a marketer within their marketplaces? It's going to be very different.
Got it. All right, so let me make sure I got this right. What you're saying is that to win in a commerce world, you need to move from a marketer's mentality to a seller's mentality. And a seller's mentality, at its core, is to first understand that each marketplace has its own fundamentals, as you were just speaking about. Not only their own fundamentals, but their own incentives. Yeah. Second is that when you look at ROAS, it's too narrow a definition of success. What you want to be looking at is category rank and other forms of relevance within that marketplace that a seller would look at more so than just placing your ad and looking at what leads to the most buys. And lastly is that there is an actual honesty in keyword language. But to each platform is different honesty, considering the approach and the mentality on that platform and what the keyword dictates. And taking that into account into your mentality will lead to more of a seller mentality. I hope I got that right.
That's exactly right, and much more concise.
Thankfully, we spoke about this before. So when it does come to this mentality, if everyone were to shift to seller mentality, first off, what would your haters say? What would the naysayers say about this mindset change for marketers?
So I think answering this kind of directly, what's an interesting kind of predicament, again, maybe use that already, or interesting situation we're in is when we're thinking about how we talk about audiences and how we talk about the value of precision or programmatic and precision targeting. That is approached very different and still thought about again in terms of that ROAS, getting the eyeballs, getting the reach. But is Walmart, is Amazon, is these key retailers start to offer these off-platform media capabilities, we really need to start to think about what their role is in terms of driving that sale and not just approaching programmatic in a way that we have because that's where it's comfortable and we're simply targeting an audience. And so I guess to your question in terms of what would my haters say, I get a lot of, yeah, that's nice in theory, but, and so, they maybe are hating the pursuit of making this a more purist experience when it again is through the eyes of the seller. What is that programmatic? What is the eyeball exposure actually doing to the final sale?
So what's your ideal state? Everyone thinks like a seller. What does the world look like then? Like, how is the world different than it is today?
I think that is thinking like a seller. Maybe it sounds counterintuitive, but I actually think that it will force marketers and sellers and brands to deliver an experience that is more relevant to what a customer and a shopper wants. And so in that way, I think it will be a better world because it's not necessarily, this eyeball pollution of trying to get in front of someone and yell at them, but it's actually trying to sell them the product that is right for what they need at that time. And as marketplaces continue to grow and people get to choose which retailer, which marketplace that they actually want to engage with more, I think that they're going to get these more positive experiences because the entire infrastructure will be built around that. Obviously that's a more purist view, but that would be the ideal state. I also, I think being a bit of an idealist, I do think that these third-party marketplaces coming to bear, if thought about and approached the right way, really opens the door to small, medium-sized businesses and the offering of multiple products and brands that weren't currently seen in some of these traditional brick and mortar stores could be a future that we see, which is exciting.
Awesome. So I'm on board, and you're in the lead. So what happens next? What happens first to get towards this chefkin mentality?
Um, it's really how proving out the value of actually focusing on your category rank. And so, technical, tactical answer, I know, but this variable sits in front of us. And as we continue to build out campaigns and programs and partnerships on behalf of our clients, the more that we can bring to them, here is a ROAS measure, here is a category and a variable sales rank measure, and here's your actual sales performance, and linking it back and proving out the story to give them confidence and why this is a measure that is more true to actually estimating and more predictive measures to know how you're actually going to perform as a seller than what we're currently doing. And so it's a process of shepherding people in that direction and really proving the case that this is a measure that will allow them to be more predictive and more prepared to drive the most sales and the best experience possible.
Got it. Okay. Well, before we let you go, I wanted to give you one chance to speak to our entire audience across Publicis Commerce marketing platforms. If you had one call out to the market, one rallying cry in one phrase, what would it be?
Be a seller and not a marketer.
Got it. Thank you. Well, thanks, Molly. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your insight and for putting your argument out there. So thank you for everyone for listening. We hope this got you thinking, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Drop us an email. Otherwise, join us again next month for another great guest who will hopefully leave you thinking, I could buy that.